he would say to me, Rory, Libya's a bite-sized British problem. Let's sort out Libya. So you'd go away, you'd do a lot of work, you'd come back, you'd say, Foreign Secretary, unfortunately we don't have an ambassador in Libya, there's a civil war, but with £40 million we can do this, that, and he'd just lose interest totally. Or I would bring together a big strategy, I'd announce it to him, and he'd go, brilliant, Rory, do it, you've got absolute power. And then I'd say to the civil servants, great, so that's a go, right? He said we could do this. And they'd be like, well, Rory, but tomorrow we could go back, say the opposite to him, and he'd be like, brilliant, do it, right?
What do you think the electoral consequences for the Conservative Party are going to be?
I think catastrophic.
Really?
Finally, I think he's run out of road. I mean, I know I've been saying this for a long time.
A lot of people have been saying it for a long time.
I know, and I believed the guy ran out of road about 10 years ago, right? I thought he's never going to be elected Prime Minister because obviously people aren't going to want a liar as Prime Minister.
You can look back over your political career and say that you were fully honest the entire time.
No, definitely not.
Rory Stewart, hello.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Likewise, how are you?
I'm very well.
Another day, another Boris Johnson scandal.
Yeah.
How much of what we're seeing at the moment with Boris Johnson is an established pattern of behaviour?
It's very much a pattern of behaviour, and one of the reasons it's so frustrating trying to call him out is that he's always saying, oh, it's just some small thing, and he's ignoring the fact that he's done it again and again and again, and people can barely remember. It's almost a deliberate technique that if he scatters enough scandal, people are barely going to remember the last one.
So, let's talk about this week. Sue Gray report comes out yesterday on Wednesday. Today on Thursday we had this big announcement about dealing with the cost of living crisis. Rishi Sunak's pinched the windfall tax from the Labour Party. He's going to cancel the repayment of the energy bill surplus. It seems quite macabre playing politics with the cost of living crisis, you know, making these big announcements that are going to help people, significantly improve people's lives, but making them at a time that it's politically fortuitous for him to do so.
I mean, I guess that's sort of how politics works, isn't it? That often they try to cover up one scandal with another announcement. I think it's difficult, though, for them, because the problem is that basically Number 10 is obsessed with trying to keep this funny floating monster alive, and they are obsessed day in, day out with the headlines. And so there isn't really the long-term planning. We heard a lot, it's back in 2019, nearly 3 years ago now, about how they were going to level up, how there was going to be a big recovery plan, and there's precious little to be seen for it. And I think the reason why is that he's so obsessed with trying to get through scandal after scandal, and he generates so many. I mean, this is one of the many reasons why people should get rid of him, is that it's impossible for him to govern, because it's a lobbying scandal this week, it's a wallpaper scandal the week after, it's a scandal about Newcastle Football Club, it's a scandal about cakes. And what we know about him is he'll just keep generating.
Rory said this is how politics works. Does it have to be how politics works?
No, and I think one of the things that's so sad about it is that Boris Johnson is reminding us of the fact that there's a connection between moral character and the way you do your job. And often we don't want to believe that. We often want to believe that you can be really effective and a rogue. But in politics that's difficult because truth matters. If you don't tell the truth, then the people who work for you find it very difficult to do anything. Because they don't know whether what you say today is what you're going to say tomorrow, whether any of this stuff is believed. And for a government to work, the person at the top has got to have a sense that you really know what they believe and they're going to stick to it. Because you're asking civil servants and others to throw themselves into projects, people to take risks. You're asking people to go out on television and defend you, so they have to believe that there's some integrity there. And without that, the whole system falls to pieces. So he's an amazing illustration of how morality, ethics, integrity actually means governing well, changing people's lives.
Do you think you can look back over your political career and say that you were fully honest the entire time?
No, definitely not. And I think the challenge for politicians is that we are being encouraged to spin and sell. We're sort of salesmen, and we're often salesmen with quite a dodgy product. And that's partly the parties. The nature of our parties mean we're not really independent people. We're signing up to these platforms that we're trying to defend against another side. And maybe you agree with 80% of your party, but you're having to compromise on 20% of it, but you're selling 100% all the time. Nevertheless, I think it's possible to be a more or less truthful politician. I think that British politics did have people who were able to admit where they were wrong, who were able to resign, and Boris Johnson has jumped into another dimension. I absolutely believe that people like myself needed to improve. There were many things we said which we could have done better on. But broadly speaking, I was proud of my comments. I thought Theresa May was basically a decent person. She was a politician, yes, she had to sell messages, she's basically a decent person. And when you sat down with her one-on-one, you knew where she was coming from. The problem with Boris Johnson is it's not just the public nonsense, it's even in private. You get no sense at all of what he believes or what you're really going to be able to do with him or for him, because I think he's completely, from his head to his toes, totally inconsistent. There's no framework there.
Give an example when you're in government, how that might have hamstrung your efforts in terms of governance policy.
Yeah, so give you a small example. He would say to me, Rory, Libya's a bite-sized British problem, let's sort out Libya. So you'd go away, you'd do a lot of work, you'd come back, you'd say, Foreign Secretary, unfortunately we don't have an ambassador in Libya, there's a civil war, but with £40 million we can do this, that, and he'd just lose interest totally. Or I would bring together a big strategy, I'd announce it to him, and he'd go, brilliant, Rory, do it, you've got absolute power. And then I'd say to the civil servants, great, so that's a go, right? He said we could do this. And they'd be like, well, Rory, but tomorrow we could go back, say the opposite to him, and he'd be like, brilliant, do it, right? So the problem is you can't run something unless you understand what the beliefs of the Prime Minister are. Mrs. Thatcher, many people, obviously still to this day, hate her, but people knew what she stood for, and that meant that she could run a government. Everybody, down to the most junior minister and civil servant, if they said to themselves, what does Margaret Thatcher, what would she think about this? Everybody would know the answer, because she had very clear views. And she thought hard, and she argued, she loved arguing. Boris Johnson, he doesn't argue, because he doesn't really have any opinions. He had one big opinion, which is that he should attach himself to Brexit and get Brexit done. And since then, who knows what he thinks about windfall tax? Who knows what he thinks about the cost of living? Who knows what he thinks about COVID response? Who knows whether he even believed any of those rules that he was bringing in and imposing on people? Presumably not, given that he let the whole of Downing Street get into some Berlusconi bunga party.
Do you think the reason, and we'll come back to ideas and energy within the Conservative Party, but do you think the reason Boris Johnson specifically doesn't have any is because he's guided by one principle, being his self-preservation?
Yeah, he's desperate about self-preservation. It's the thing that matters most to him in the world, is Boris and Boris surviving. He doesn't want to do anything that inconveniences himself. He doesn't want to put his hand in his wallet. He doesn't want to pay his bets. He doesn't want to do anything that inconveniences him in any way. And he's never going to resign, because he knows how to fight for Boris. That's what he really believes in. Get Boris done. Believe in Boris.
Back to the slogans of 2019.
Yeah.
Ideas and energy within the Conservative Party. Rachel Reeves stood up in the chamber today after the windfall tax announcement and said, "You're nicking my ideas." And the quote was something like, "There are no ideas and there's no energy in the Conservative Party."
Well, I'm afraid, and this is the point at which I'm going to go bipartisan here, there's no ideas in British politics.
Yeah.
Right, very depressed. I did 2 shows last night, Leicester Square Theatre, probably 800 people. Majority of those people probably Labour sympathising voters. When I said who'd consider voting for Labour Party, almost every hand went up. And then I said, do any of you know what Labour's economic policies are? Total silence. So there is a problem here, which is, yes, attack Boris for his dishonesty, because truth matters, integrity matters. But if Labour's going to win, they're going to need to communicate some policies. People are going to have to actually know what they really care about, believe in. And nicking policies, everybody nicks policies, to be honest. You've got to grow up. Tony Blair nicked any Conservative policy that he liked. In fact, one of the reasons Conservatives got scared about announcing policies, if he liked it, he'd just nick it. Right? So that's fine. And they should actually own that. They should say, thank you very much for taking our policy, and here's another one we'd like you to take.
It's interesting. I feel like Keir Starmer's gambit has been present a likeable face, a professional face, the return of managerialism in a way. Contrast with Boris Johnson becomes obvious. But you're saying that actually that needs to be attached to a policy platform.
Yeah. Labour won in '97 because they had a very, very clear message. They had their one word, they had their one phrase, they had their one page, and they had their 5 pledges. And above all, they were credible on the economy. People knew what they were going to do on the economy, and we don't feel that with Keir Starmer yet.
You've been spending too much time with Alistair Campbell.
I have. I kind of live with Alistair Campbell at home. I spent 3 hours with him last night. I spent
Lunch.
2 hours with him today. Yeah.
What do you think the electoral consequences for the Conservative Party are going to be?
I think catastrophic.
Really?
Finally, I think he's run out of road. I mean, I know I've been saying this for a long time.
A lot of people have been saying it for a long time.
I know, and I believed the guy ran out of road about 10 years ago, right? I thought he's never going to be elected Prime Minister because obviously people aren't going to want a liar as Prime Minister. They're going to want a serious person, so I was wrong about that. I thought that his particular version of Brexit was going to go horribly wrong and he'd lose young voters and he'd lose most of the South East, and I was wrong about that. But I think now, finally, I think people have seen through it. I'm praying they've finally seen through it.
I guess the counterpoint is, everything you've just said, there's a pattern of behaviour, and it goes back before the 2019 general election, it goes back before the Tory leadership election, it goes back before the Brexit referendum, it goes back probably even before he was Mayor of London, at least the second term. And regardless, he is an election winner.
Well, so that's
what's different this time?
So that's what the Conservatives are gambling. I think what he did this time does matter to people. I think that the COVID rules that he imposed were done in such a hypocritical way. Those ministers were so pompous, and the penalty notices and the police, you can only have this number of people at a funeral, and everybody I knew who was getting married had to delay their weddings or do it without their family there, and it was so intense. And he was the face of that. And to see him behaving like that down the street, I think really rankles. People don't care so much about the fact that he lied to his bosses, cheated on his wife, lied to Parliament. They don't care that much about it, but they do care when they see what that hypocrisy really means. And I think people sense that a Prime Minister cannot make these grand speeches during COVID about how we're all making these sacrifices, we're all going to follow these clear rules, while the Bunga Bunga parties go.
Every time you say that, it makes me laugh and throws me off the next question.
It's like Berlusconi. I mean, he's finally kind of cracked through. He's trying to turn British politics into the Italian politics of the kind of mid-2000s. It's extraordinary.
So, laden through all of this, we are talking about your last great political rival, really, aren't we, with Boris Johnson?
Yeah.
How much of what you're saying now is bitterness? Because he beat you.
Yeah, he definitely beat me. I think I'm mystified rather than bitter about him beating me. I mean, I still don't quite understand.
So look at yourself in the mirror. Take a long, hard look.
Yeah, I'd have to take a long, hard look because I look at him like, what? I mean, just how bad am I that this guy could beat me? I mean, honestly, it was extraordinary. I mean, I'm just rewatching the second leadership debate, where I completely blew myself up. And I'm saying in the debate again and again, you're not going to be able to get a new deal out of Brussels and deal with the Irish border. Right? It's not going to happen. And it wasn't because I was sort of Yoda, right? Quite obviously, if they leave the customs union, there's going to have to be a border somewhere. There can't be a border in Ireland because of the Good Friday Agreement. There's going to have to be a border in the Irish Sea. So, and I thought this was a killer argument because it was just true, right? And the guy was in la la land. Yeah. So I keep saying this, getting more and more grumpy in the debate.
Believe in the bin, yeah.
Yeah, and eventually I'm like contorting my body, ripping off my tie, kind of staring at the scene. And I don't manage it. He's just sitting there. Oh, yes, well, brilliant. Yeah, we're going to leave by the 31st of October. We're going to get Brexit done. Nothing. I was in Ireland during the Troubles. I know about Ireland. No problem. Over my dead body will be the border. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Right? You can't. So, yes, I've got to look at myself. I obviously I'm not a good enough performer. I didn't manage to be, I don't know, funny enough, appealing enough, or maybe not angry enough. Maybe I should have just been much angrier. Or maybe the whole nation had got themselves into a collective delusion that somehow there was a Brexit that didn't involve any compromises and that you could do without any consequences in Ireland. Or maybe the Conservative Party got themselves in that delusion. But I don't think it's primarily bitterness, because the main thing that motivated me in the entire leadership campaign was to take out Boris Johnson. That's what my whole campaign was about. I mean, actually, I did care deeply about the shape of Brexit, but I cared more about not having this man as Prime Minister.
So let's say your predictions turn out to be true. Boris Johnson is, not by resignation, but implodes in some way. Maybe it's an election, maybe he gets, there's a coup, who knows. That removes the big reason for you leaving the Conservative Party. Would you go back?
I think if I felt there was a leader with integrity, who was really espousing what I cared about in the Conservative Party, which is a dying tradition, kind of one nation tradition, which is about prudence at home, restraint abroad, respect for tradition, and I think doing things that really change people's lives. I mean, I think there is room in the Conservative Party for really sorting out social care, adult social care, for example, which is a disgrace. Sorting out prisons, which are this incredible shame in our country. If I found a leader who I thought had a moral purpose, I would rejoin, of course I would. But at the moment, it's a pretty dismal showing going on in that cabinet.
It's interesting. That's a change in position from the last time I spoke to you. The last time I spoke to you was basically 10 years. Don't even talk to me about it now. And that's a softening of your position there.
I think my position is softening, but I'm also aware that realistically, my sort of, for whatever it's called, one nation, lefty tradition, it's basically been destroyed. I mean, all the people who supported me in leadership, a lot of them were either thrown out or resigned. There's now 21 of the rebels were kicked out, and then Abu Rudd resigned, Nicky Morgan resigned. I mean, so there are very, very few people left in the Conservative Party now from that tradition, and it's been replaced by something that feels to me, I'm afraid, a little bit more like UKIP. So for somebody like me to return to the Conservative Party, I need to feel that it was changing. And that's why I'm excited by this teal movement in Australia.
Yeah.
Right? Because those are
independent.
They're blue-greens, right? They're blue in the sense they're sensible economically. They're green in the sense they care about the economy, they care about gender, and they care about integrity.
So we were talking about a lack of ideas just then. Is that where you see there's space, political space to make a difference in this country?
Huge political space. I'm afraid the Labour Party is not inspiring or exciting anyone. The Conservative Party is being run by Berlusconi, and yeah.
So maybe it's not rejoining the Conservative Party.
No, maybe. I mean, I still think that
bring back the independent group.
No, well, that was a catastrophe, wasn't it? I think there's a problem in British politics. I think it's very, very difficult running from centre ground. I think it's very difficult being an independent. If I think back to when I was running to be Mayor of London, most in our private polling pushing up towards 20%. If I managed to do that in proportional representation, so it's like a fifth of the seats in Parliament, right? The Prime Minister of Israel, I think, has got 1.5% of the vote at the moment, right? That's the beginning of something. You can build a party off that. But in our system, it's very unforgiving.
Let's leave it there. Rory Stewart, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
That was lovely. Thank you.